A dying man asked me if God had forgotten about Bastogne. I didn't have an answer for him. Still don't. Father Michael O'Brien, Captain, United States Army. I was a chaplain with the 101st Airborne Division during the siege of Bastogne, December 1944. They call it the Battle of the Bulge now, Hitler's last desperate offensive in the West. For 7 days, we were surrounded, outnumbered, freezing, and running out of everything. Everything except corpses and questions about God. I grew up in Boston, Irish Catholic, 3rd generation. My father was a police officer. My mother taught at the parish school. I had 2 brothers. Patrick joined the fire department. Sean became a lawyer. I went to seminary. Felt the calling early, knew I wanted to serve God. Got ordained in 1938, served at a parish in Dorchester for 3 years. When the war came, I could have stayed. Priests weren't drafted. But I kept thinking about those boys shipping overseas, 18, 19, 20 years old, scared, needing someone to pray with them. The Army needed chaplains. So in 1942, I enlisted. Went through basic training at Fort Benning, learned to march, learned to salute, learned that a Roman collar doesn't stop bullets. They assigned me to the 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, paratroopers, the best of the best, they said. Young men who volunteered to jump out of airplanes into combat. I was 32 years old, and I was supposed to minister to kids who were braver than I'd ever be. I jumped into Normandy on D-Day, landed in a field full of dead cows and German machine gun fire. Lost my communion kit in the landing. Found it 2 days later in a hedgerow covered in mud. Held Mass that Sunday, using an ammunition crate as an altar. 60 men came. By the end of the Normandy campaign, half of them were dead. That should have prepared me for what was coming. But nothing, not seminary, not Normandy, not 3 years of war. Nothing could prepare me for Bastogne. We were supposed to be resting. The 101st had fought since D-Day, Normandy, Market Garden, 3 campaigns without relief. By December, we were in Mourmelon, France. Hot food, clean uniforms, sleep in real beds. The men were writing Christmas letters home. Some were on leave in Paris. We thought the war was winding down. Then, on December 17th, the Germans attacked. Massive offensive through the Ardennes forest. 30 divisions, hundreds of thousands of men, trying to split the Allied armies and capture Antwerp. Everything was chaos. Units were getting overrun, retreating, trying to hold the line. The 101st got emergency orders, moved to Bastogne, Belgium, hold the town. It was a critical road junction, 7 roads converging. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled the movement through the Ardennes. We had to get there before the Germans. We loaded onto trucks in the middle of the night, December 18th. No winter gear, minimal ammunition, moving fast. I grabbed my chaplain's kit and climbed aboard. Around me, the paratroopers were joking, talking trash, excited to get back into action. They were kids, God help me. They were just kids. "Hey, Padre," one of them called out. Private First Class Danny Morrison from Michigan. "Say a prayer we get there before Jerry does." "Already done, son," I told him. He grinned. "Then we're golden." We reached Bastogne on the 19th. The town was already clogged with refugees and retreating American units. The Germans were closing in from all sides. We dug in around the perimeter, set up defensive positions. And then the Germans surrounded us, cut us off. We were trapped. 7,000 paratroopers and some attached units against 3 German divisions. The siege began December 20th. That's when I stopped being just a chaplain and became something else. An undertaker, a grief counselor, a man who had to look boys in the eye and tell them God loved them while they bled out in the snow. The first thing that hit you was the cold. Bastogne in December, below freezing, snow on the ground, wind that cut through every layer you wore, and we didn't have winter gear. The Army hadn't expected a winter offensive. So there we were, dug into frozen ground, wearing field jackets that weren't designed for this, watching our breath frost in the air. The second thing was the shelling. The Germans had artillery, lots of it. They'd shell us for hours. You'd hear the whistle, the scream, then the explosion. Trees would burst into splinters. The ground would erupt. Men would disappear in clouds of frozen dirt and snow. I set up my aid station in the cellar of a bombed-out building near the center of Bastogne. The real aid stations were overwhelmed. Too many wounded, not enough medics, not enough supplies. So I did what I could, held communion services, heard confessions, prayed with the dying. That first day of the siege, December 20th, they brought in a kid with his leg blown off, 19 years old, from Iowa, Corporal James Whitaker. The medics had tried to stop the bleeding, done what they could, but we all knew. He was going into shock, losing too much blood. He wasn't going to make it. I knelt beside him in that cellar. His hand was ice cold when I took it. "Am I going to die, Padre?" His voice was so small, like a child asking his father about monsters under the bed. I wanted to lie, wanted to tell him he'd be fine, that we'd get him to a hospital, that he'd be home by spring. But I couldn't. Wouldn't insult him with false hope. "Yes, son. I think you are." He started crying, not sobbing, just quiet tears running down his face. "I don't want to die here. I don't want to die in the cold. I know, I'm so sorry. Will you pray with me?" Of course. I gave him last rites, anointed him with oil I'd been saving for exactly this, said the prayers in Latin while he held my hand. When I finished, he looked at me with those young eyes and asked, "Do you think God will forgive me? For the men I killed." God forgives all who seek forgiveness. You were a soldier. You did your duty. I don't feel forgiven. I feel damned. What do you say to that? How do you comfort a dying teenager who thinks he's going to hell? "God loves you," I told him. "Whatever you've done, whoever you've hurt, God loves you. And he's waiting for you with open arms." James Whitaker died holding my hand at 16:45 hours, December 20th, 1944. I closed his eyes, said a prayer over his body, and added him to the growing list of names I was keeping. Someone had to remember them. Someone had to write their families. By nightfall, we had 11 dead. By the next morning, 23. The Germans demanded our surrender on the 22nd, sent a delegation under a white flag. General McAuliffe's response became famous. Nuts. The Germans didn't understand it, had to have it translated. We weren't surrendering. We were going to hold. But hold with what? We were running out of ammunition, running out of medical supplies, running out of food. The weather was so bad that air resupply couldn't get through. We were on our own, and the wounded kept coming. Christmas was the worst. December 25th, 1944. The day Christ was born. The day we're supposed to celebrate peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And I spent it watching boys die in agony. The Germans attacked hard that morning. Artillery barrage followed by infantry and tank assaults. Our positions were getting hit from multiple directions. The perimeter was holding, but just barely. And the casualties, God, the casualties, they were bringing them to me because the aid stations were overflowing. My cellar became an overflow ward. Wounded men lying on the stone floor, bleeding, freezing, crying out. I had no morphine, no plasma, no bandages, just my hands and my prayers. A sergeant brought in a private who'd taken shrapnel to the stomach. The kid was conscious, screaming, intestines visible through the wound. The sergeant looked at me with desperate eyes. "Can you do something, Padre?" "I'm not a doctor. Please, he's 19 years old." I knelt beside the boy, Private Thomas Kelly from Philadelphia. He was clutching his stomach, blood seeping through his fingers. His eyes were wild with pain and terror. Thomas, look at me. Look at me. I took his hand. I need you to breathe. Can you do that? Just breathe. He was hyperventilating, going into shock. I knew the signs by now. I'd seen it dozens of times. Am I going to die? Same question. They all asked it. Always the same question. I don't know, son, but I'm here. You're not alone. It hurts. Oh, God, it hurts so much. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He died screaming. Took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of agony while I held his hand and felt completely, utterly useless. What good were prayers against shrapnel? What good was faith against wounds like that? That morning alone, I gave last rites to 7 men. 7 boys who should have been home opening Christmas presents with their families. Instead, they were dying in a frozen Belgian cellar while a priest they barely knew mumbled Latin prayers over them. One of them, I don't even remember his name, God forgive me, grabbed my collar and pulled me close. "Where is God?" he whispered. "Where the fuck is God?" I didn't have an answer. Didn't have anything except more prayers that felt emptier every time I said them. Outside, I could hear the battle continuing. Machine gun fire, explosions, officers shouting, men dying, and church bells. Somewhere in Bastogne, some madman was ringing church bells for Christmas. I tried to hold a Christmas service at noon, set up in a corner of the cellar, laid out my portable altar, the one I'd carried since Normandy. Maybe 30 men came. They stood there, hollow-eyed, shivering, covered in dirt and blood, some of their own, some from their buddies. I started with a prayer. Heavenly Father, on this Christmas day, we ask for your mercy. The words felt like ashes in my mouth. What mercy? What was merciful about any of this? I looked at their faces, these young men who'd volunteered to jump out of airplanes, who'd fought across Europe, who were now surrounded and freezing and dying. And I wanted to tell them it would be okay, that God had a plan, that their suffering had meaning, but I couldn't. The lie wouldn't come. I don't know why God allows this, I said instead, off script. No prayer book, no liturgy, just the truth. I don't know why you're suffering. I don't know why good men die and evil seems to triumph. I don't have answers. I wish I did. They stared at me. Some looked shocked. Chaplains weren't supposed to admit doubt. Some looked relieved, like I'd finally said what they were all thinking. But I know this, I continued. God is here. In this cellar, in this siege, in your suffering. He's not watching from a distance. He's here, bleeding with you. The God I believe in doesn't sit on a throne watching us suffer. He came down to earth, took human form, and suffered with us. That's Christmas. That's the meaning. Emmanuel, God with us, even here, even now. I gave them communion, broken pieces of hardtack bread and watered-down wine, all I had left, the body and blood of Christ, distributed in a basement in Bastogne while Germans tried to kill us. After the service, a young lieutenant came up to me, Lieutenant Robert Hayes from Georgia. Thank you, Padre, for being honest. I'm not sure honesty is what you need right now. It's what we all need. We've heard enough bullshit about glory and honor. You told us the truth. That's something. That afternoon, Lieutenant Hayes was killed by a direct artillery hit. 31 men from his platoon were wounded. I performed last rites on 4 more that day. Merry Christmas. The days blurred together. December 26th, 27th, 28th. More shelling, more attacks, more wounded, more dead. The cold was constant. Men were getting frostbite, trench foot. Some lost fingers or toes to the cold. The lucky ones just lost digits. Others lost feet. Some lost legs. We were eating one meal a day, sometimes less. The supply situation was desperate. Ammunition was rationed. Riflemen got 10 rounds a day. Artillery crews were counting shells. We were salvaging equipment from German dead. My cellar was never empty. Always someone dying, someone needing confession, someone asking why God had abandoned us. I heard more confessions in those days than in 3 years as a parish priest. Men who'd never been religious suddenly wanted to make peace with God. Atheists asking for baptism. Protestants begging for last rites because I was the only chaplain available. One soldier, Sergeant Paul DeMarco from New York, came to me on the 26th. Padre, I need to confess something. We sat in a corner while artillery shells exploded overhead. I killed prisoners, he said, after Normandy, German prisoners. They surrendered and I shot them. How many? 3, maybe 4. I don't remember exactly. I was so angry. My best friend had been killed, and I lost it. Do you regret it? Every day, every single day. Am I going to hell for that? What do you say? What's the right answer? I believed in God's mercy, believed in forgiveness, but I also believed in justice. Those German soldiers, they'd surrendered. They'd trusted that we'd follow the rules of war. God forgives those who truly repent, I told him. If your regret is genuine, and I believe it is, then yes, you can be forgiven. But you have to live with what you did. You have to carry it. That's part of the penance. I've been carrying it for 6 months. It's killing me. Then let Christ carry it with you. That's what he does. He bears our burdens. I gave him absolution. He cried, thanked me, went back to his position. He died the next day. Took shrapnel from a mortar round. I found his body in the snow, half covered by dirt from the explosion. I said a prayer over him, added his name to my list. Paul DeMarco, Sergeant, 24 years old, New York City. Carried his guilt all the way to Bastogne. I wondered if he'd found peace, if God had really forgiven him, if any of this meant anything. On December 26th, the weather cleared. Just for a few hours, but it was enough. C-47 transport planes came over, dropping supplies by parachute. Food, ammunition, medical supplies. The men cheered. First time I'd heard them cheer in days. One of the supply canisters crashed through the roof of my cellar. Landed 10 feet from where I was giving last rites to a wounded trooper. We both stared at it, then at each other. God's aim needs work, he said. Despite everything, I laughed. First time in days. Inside the canister, bandages, plasma, morphine. Finally, I could do more than just pray. Could actually help. I spent the next 12 hours treating wounds, administering morphine, saving lives instead of just watching men die. It felt like a miracle. Small one, maybe, but I'd take it. The 101st held. Every attack we held. We were down to critical ammunition levels. We were freezing, we were starving. But we held the line. The Germans couldn't break us. On December 27th, Patton's Third Army broke through the German encirclement. Tanks and infantry pushing up from the south. We heard them before we saw them. The rumble of Shermans, the sound of American voices over the radio. Relief was coming. We'd survived. 7 days surrounded, outnumbered 5 to 1, freezing, starving, but we'd survived. But the cost, God, the cost. The relief came on December 27th, but the fighting didn't stop. The Germans were still attacking, still trying to take Bastogne. We held them. With Patton's armor supporting us, we held them and started pushing them back. But I was done. Not physically. I was still standing, still functioning. But something inside me had broken. December 28th, they brought in a kid who'd stepped on a mine. Both legs gone at the knees. He was conscious, screaming, begging me to help him. I gave him morphine. We had some now, thank God, but it wasn't enough. He was in agony. Please, he kept saying, please make it stop. Please. He was 18 years old, Private Richard Chen, California. He'd been in combat for 2 weeks, and now he had no legs. I held his hand, said the prayers, did everything I was supposed to do. But something inside me was screaming at God, at the war, at the universe. This wasn't right. None of this was right. Richard died after 3 hours. Shock and blood loss. Another name for my list. Another letter I'd have to write. That night, I walked out of my cellar. First time in days. The town was destroyed. Buildings collapsed. Streets cratered by shells. The snow was stained with blood and oil. Bodies were stacked like cordwood, waiting for graves' registration. Frozen solid in the December cold. I walked to what was left of the town church. The roof was gone, blown off by artillery. The walls were pockmarked with bullet holes. But the altar was still standing. And the crucifix, hanging there above the altar, Christ on the cross, covered in stone dust and debris. I stood there looking at that crucifix, and I felt nothing. Empty. Hollow. Where were you? I said out loud. Where were you while they died? While they screamed? While they begged me to save them? No answer. Just the wind through the broken walls. I've been telling them you love them, that you're with them, that their suffering has meaning. But I don't believe it anymore. I can't. I've watched too many boys die. Good boys. Boys who believed in you, who prayed, who tried to do right. And you let them die in agony. Still nothing. I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't know how to comfort them when I can't comfort myself. I don't know how to have faith when faith feels like a lie. I wanted to cry, wanted to break down, sob, let it all out. But I couldn't. I was too empty, too broken. The tears wouldn't come. A voice behind me. Padre? I turned. It was Danny Morrison, the kid from Michigan who'd asked me to pray we'd get to Bastogne before the Germans. He'd made it through the siege, frostbite on his hands, bruises and cuts, but alive. You okay, Padre? No, I said. Honest answer. No, I'm not okay. He came and stood beside me looking at the crucifix. None of us are. We stood there in silence. Two men looking at a broken church in a broken town, trying to find meaning in the wreckage. You know what kept me going, Danny said. Knowing you were here. Knowing that if I got hit, you'd be there. That I wouldn't die alone. That someone would pray for me. Prayer doesn't stop bullets. No, but it helps, more than you know. He left me there, went back to his position. And I stayed in that church, staring at that crucifix, trying to find my faith again. I didn't find it that night, but I decided something. Even if I didn't believe, even if I had doubts, I'd keep doing the work. I'd keep praying for the dying, keep offering comfort, keep being there, because they needed someone. And I was all they had. Maybe that was faith, not certainty, not answers, but showing up anyway. The siege of Bastogne officially ended January 9th, 1945. We'd held for 19 days. The 101st took over 2,000 casualties, killed, wounded, missing. I performed last rites on 127 men during those 19 days. Wrote letters to 127 families telling them their sons, husbands, brothers had died in Belgium. I kept going, finished the war. Was there when we crossed the Rhine, when we liberated concentration camps, when Germany surrendered. Saw things that made Bastogne look like a Sunday picnic, Dachau especially. The camp we liberated in April 1945. Mountains of bodies, living skeletons. Evidence of evil so pure, so absolute, that it defied comprehension. After that, I stopped asking where God was, started asking where humanity had gone. I left the Army in 1946, went back to Boston. The Archdiocese offered me a parish, St. Catherine's in Southie. I took it, thought I could go back to normal ministry. Baptisms, weddings, Sunday masses, peaceful work, but I wasn't the same priest who'd left in 1942. The war had changed me, broken something fundamental. I'd lost my certainty, my unquestioning faith. I still believed in God, but it was complicated now, conditional, full of doubts. The nightmares were constant. I'd wake up in the rectory, gasping, hearing screams, seeing James Whittaker's face, hearing Thomas Kelly crying for his mother, remembering the boy who asked if God had forgotten about Bastogne. I started drinking. Not during the day, I could still perform my duties, but at night. Whiskey to quiet the memories, to let me sleep without dreams. It worked for a while. Then it didn't. In 1951, the Archdiocese sent me for treatment. I spent 6 months in a facility in Vermont, working through what we'd now call PTSD. Back then, they called it battle fatigue, moral injury, shell shock. Didn't matter what you called it. The symptoms were the same. The guilt, the nightmares, the crushing weight of having watched men die while feeling completely helpless. The treatment helped. Some. I stopped drinking, learned to manage the nightmares, went back to St. Catherine's and tried to be a good priest. But I was different now. When people came to confession with their small sins, missing Mass, impure thoughts, white lies, I had to bite my tongue, wanted to tell them about real sin, about what humans were capable of, about Dachau, about watching boys bleed to death in the snow. But I didn't. I listened. I gave absolution. I did my job. Over the years, I got letters from some of the men who'd survived Bastogne. Danny Morrison wrote me every Christmas, told me about his life, his wife, his kids. Always ended with, "Thank you for being there, Padre. You saved my life. I didn't save anyone, couldn't save anyone, but I was there. That's all I could do." In 1969, I retired from active ministry. 23 years at St. Catherine's. The Archdiocese gave me a small pension, a room in the retirement home for priests. I spend my days reading, walking, trying to make peace with memories that won't fade. I'm 63 years old now. The war ended 25 years ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like another life, lived by a different person. I still have my list. The names of the 127 men I gave last rites to at Bastogne. I read it every December on the anniversary. Say a prayer for each one. It's the least I can do. People ask me sometimes if I regret going to war, if I wish I'd stayed safe in Boston, serving a parish instead of jumping into Normandy and freezing in Bastogne. I don't know. That priest who enlisted in 1942, young, idealistic, certain of his faith, I don't know him anymore. The war killed him as surely as it killed those boys. What came back was someone different, someone with doubts, someone who'd seen too much. But would I do it again? Would I go back to that cellar in Bastogne, hold those dying boys' hands, watch them slip away while mumbling prayers I wasn't sure I believed? Yes, I would. Because they needed someone. Because dying alone is worse than dying with someone who cares, even if that someone is broken himself. That boy who asked if God had forgotten about Bastogne, I never answered him. Couldn't answer him. But I've thought about that question every day for 25 years. Had God forgotten about Bastogne? I don't know. Some days I think yes. that God looked away while we suffered. Other days I think maybe God was there in that cellar, suffering with us, crying with us, dying with us. Maybe that's what the incarnation means. Not that God prevents suffering, but that he enters into it, becomes part of it, bears it with us. Or maybe that's just what I tell myself so I can sleep at night. I don't have the answers I had before the war, don't have that certainty, that unquestioning faith. What I have now is something harder, more complicated. A faith that includes doubt, a belief that's been tested and broken and rebuilt into something different. Is it stronger? I don't know. It's more honest, at least. The boys I prayed with at Bastogne, they deserved better than what they got. Deserved to grow old, have families, live full lives. They deserved a world that didn't send them to freeze and die in Belgium. But they didn't get that. They got me instead. A priest with shaking hands and empty prayers, doing his best in an impossible situation. I hope it was enough. I hope that in their last moments my presence gave them some comfort. That knowing someone cared made the dying easier. But I'll never know. That's another thing the war took from me. Certainty about whether I made any difference at all. All I have are the names. 127 names. 127 boys who died in the snow while I held their hands and prayed to a God I wasn't sure was listening. That's my war. That's what I carry. They gave me the Bronze Star for my service at Bastogne. Sits in a drawer somewhere. Never look at it. Medals are for heroes, and I wasn't a hero. I was just a priest who couldn't save anyone but tried anyway. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Show up, try, bear witness, remember the names. James Whitaker, Thomas Kelly, Paul DeMarco, Richard Chen, Danny Morrison, who lived, thank God, and all the others, all the boys who died believing someone would remember them. I remember. I'll remember until the day I die. And when I do die, when it's finally my turn, I hope I see them again. Hope I can apologize for not having better answers, for not saving them, for being so damn useless when they needed someone strong. Maybe they'll forgive me. Maybe God will. Maybe that's what heaven is, finally getting the answers I couldn't give them in that frozen cellar in Bastogne. Until then, I keep the list. I say the prayers. And I try to believe that their deaths meant something. Even if I'm not sure they did. Even if God really had forgotten about Bastogne after all.